I presently have PhotoPaint open, and I've gone ahead and opened a raw camera file. And of course, by default, as with CorelDRAW, all raw camera files will open up in the Camera Raw Lab for you to make any required adjustments before moving ahead with any design work. The Camera Raw Lab allows you to do things that your camera didn't do for you. In other words, if you choose to set your camera to save your images in a raw format, what you're doing is you're taking the decision making away from the camera and allow it so that you yourself can make those decisions, and that is a very good thing to do. If your camera is set to capture images and convert them to a JPEG, TIFF or some form of bitmap format, there is a compression being applied, and that means that you're losing image quality and integrity. And it does that so that you can save lots of photos within the memory of the camera. Of course, raw camera files take up a lot more disk space. So we've got an image here, and it was around about a 6 megabyte image, just to give you an idea of the file size. And it does need some color correction, so we're going to work our way through the Camera Lab. How does it work, and what are the things we should be looking for? Well, before we start adjusting our image, we need to decide 48-bit or 24-bit. Now remember, we're using a raw camera file because it contains so much color information for us to be able to work with. So dropping from 48 to 24 does mean you will lose information. However, I have to admit the outcome still is a very good quality outcome. But of course, for the best outcome, 48-bit is the way to go. I will note for you right now, you will need to go to 24-bit mode for a number of effects within both PhotoPaint and CorelDRAW. So if ever you see them grayed out, it may be because you need to swap from 48-bit to 24-bit mode. Well, we need to start on the first page, the Color tab, and start with white balance. Well, as shot from the drop-down menu is as shot, as you can see. Auto allows the lab to make some decisions for you and do it automatically. I'll choose that option. Look, a very, very light blue cast was placed over the image. From my perspective, it didn't really do anything that I would want to work with. If you choose the other options, say for example tungsten, it will throw a very blue cast, and something like shade will be a more yellow cast. Well, none of those are particularly what I want to work with, so what I might do is try the eyedropper option. Effectively, this allows you to perform your own white balance. If you select the eyedropper tool, the idea is click in the whitest, most colorless area of your image. And you'll find this is what you do with some video cameras and expensive digital cameras. You hold up something white and you adjust the light balance against that white object. So I'm going to click right here and see what the system does, and it has thrown a real blue cast. Well, I don't really agree with that, not what I'm looking for, so I'm going to for right now reset to original. The next area is temperature. Effectively, this slider allows you to change the major cast of color over your image. For me, I actually believe there's a slight blue cast over this, so I'm going to move away from the blue end and more toward the magenta yellowy end. The tint slider is almost a fine-tune adjustment of the temperature. As I move the tint, you'll notice the color of the temperature above change. So as I move to the right, the temperature is becoming quite yellow in toward there. Well, I still think I do need to move toward yellow, or ochre if I would call it. And notice how the green in the background actually looks a lot more green now. Well, let's think about that. If we have a blue cast and we move more toward a yellow ochre tint, well, of course, blue and yellow makes green, so our green will be more highlighted and, of course, a richer green color. Notice the histogram. The green level has increased. Saturation really will make your image look more vivid in one direction or pale in the other direction. But for right now, I'm going to reset to original, and I would just minutely adjust that one and minutely adjust to about there, and that would be my temperature and tint adjustments for the moment. Let's go ahead now and look at the lighting area. The next three sliders we're working with are all really to do with lighting. At this point, it pays to watch your histogram and to watch these two little hints buttons, if you like, or actually they're warning buttons, and I'll show you how they work in a moment. For me, I always like to go to an extreme just to see what something does. And in going to the extreme, you'll immediately notice the hints option. This particular one here says we're now clipping the image, and really we can see that. If I just zoom in a little, zoom back out there, see all of this white in here? That is the clipping that this is referring to. In fact, if you click on the little hint button, it will colorize with that pink there all of the areas that are being clipped, and basically it's the whole image, as you can see. So exposure, be careful of it. Let's go to say 0.6 and see what that looks like. Well, even though I've come down so far, according to the hints, well, it's still overexposed. Let's come down a little lower, 0.3. Now here's the thing, I'm almost back to a 0 value and still it's saying it's overexposed. Let me quickly turn off the highlighter that's highlighting the clipped areas, and I want to quickly show you this. Exposure gives you that sense of brightening an image, and even though that really, at first look looks okay, it's actually damaging the image. If I zoom in a lot closer, we can see all of that white damage there. So make sure you watch the little hint option there. So I think for us, we'll go back to 0, or actually we'll try 0.1. And even there at 0.1, or no, at 0.1 we're okay. We'll just go up a little, 0.2. And 0.4, say. How far can we go? There we go, and the hints are letting us know we're clipping. So really, what do we have? Like a 0.3 variance we could work with. So I'm going to go back to 0.2 and stay there at that, and zoom back out. Now the next area to work with is brightness. So I'm going to work with brightness. I'll go straight away up to 50% and just watch my hints area here, and watch the histogram. That really did help balance the histogram out a bit. Our perfect histogram would be effectively starting right in the left hand corner all the way over to the right hand corner with even color balance throughout. That is rare and very rarely ever happens, so we're looking for the best compromise possible. As I move brightness to the right, well, of course I'm going to shift colors to the right, so be a little careful. And that looks okay, so I'm going to create a snapshot. So click create snapshot, and I've got a reference to come back to at this point. The next slider, the shadow slider, what it does is it creates contrast, and it will also move the pixels, color pixels, to the left. So let's just watch the little hints option here, and where is too far? Right there is too far. Notice how the colors came down. If we click the button, we'll see all of the highlighted areas. And you see there's little dots of green just in there. I'll exaggerate that a bit more for you. See all those green areas in there? Okay, so come back to say a value around 30. No, we're still clipping a little bit underneath that. And notice the histogram suddenly jumps to a more or a fresher, better looking histogram. Okay, well I'll take a snapshot of that as well. Well, I can alternate between those two. That one's just a little lighter and possibly lacking contrast. This one I do think looks a little better. The one comment I would make is it looks a little too vivid, a little too green, a little too pink. So right now I would desaturate just to pale off the image a bit, but I've got to be careful, otherwise we'll lose contrast. A little bit more, and I don't mind that. So I'm going to create a snapshot of that. Well, we're next going to look at the details page. Sharpness, luminance, and color noise. To work with them, you really need to zoom into your image very, very closely. And it's only at this level of zoom that you will get a good idea of the effect that they're having. Luminance is a little bit like a snowy grey pixels appearing within your image. Let me just adjust this by a value of 1 so you can see what happens. Notice how it almost looks like a slight little blur took place? Well, it removed all of the whitey grey pixels, and there's many of them throughout the image. Now if I go a lot further and really increase the luminance noise area, you'll notice it didn't make that much more difference. A slight more sense of blur. So really, you want minimal blurring, obviously. So a value of 1 or 2, in this particular case anyway, is what we're looking for. So I'll type a value of 1 in. Color noise, in this particular image, oops, I'll need to adjust that again, there we go. The color noise in this image is actually, there's really not a great deal there. If I adjust the noise right up to here, you'll find you won't see a lot of difference. Color noise is, it's like random colored pixels appearing where they simply shouldn't be. That's what you would call color noise. And in my case, I really can't see any, so I won't adjust this at all. Well, sharpness is something I would adjust after I have adjusted luminance and color noise. It allows for some of that blurring effect that gets created. So if we adjust the sharpness to say 24, just watch the edge. See how the edge just cleaned up a little? I'll turn that off again. Be careful, you're trying to find that point where if I go too far, you'll find that obviously we're highly pixelated, back to halfway, and these are the things that you have to do. And you will notice, by the way, that the warning came up just then, so do pay attention to that. So really between 0 and around 45, something like that, is our working area. And I'd be inclined to suggest, even there for me, I can see just the odd little bit of pixelation. So I think back here around the 25 mark would be around about right for me. So the properties page, just to highlight this for you, is obviously a page of reference. If you ever took a photograph and you thought that was an absolutely perfectly taken photograph, at least here you can come and see when you took your photograph and all of the settings that you actually had. So properties is great, I think, from that perspective. Well, I'll zoom back out now, and that's effectively my image, and I'm happy with my end result. So I'm going to click OK, and that's it for the Camera Raw Lab.